Data Storytellers. Today, I'm here with Waun Broderick, who is the Chief Technology Officer for Labnetik in Canada. Great to have you with us, Waun.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here. Really excited to do this.
Yes, likewise. Waun and I have known each other for many, many years now, and our paths have finally crossed. So before we get into all that, tell us a little bit about your professional journey to becoming the CTO at Gyroscopic and Labnetik.
Certainly. So what I can say is my journey is kind of classical. I did start with an education in computer science. I did an undergraduate in Peterborough, Ontario, just shy north of Toronto, and I did have a focus in software engineering. It was in 2013 to around 2018, so we were on a little bit of the tail edge of the data boom. And at that point in time, a lot of companies and I guess organizations really understood the power of data, if that was artificial intelligence or actually leveraging their data to bring insights, efficiencies, and benefits to their company. The institutions obviously had to follow after suit to kind of fulfill the need that we were seeing in the kind of private and public industry. And my school was a little bit smaller. It was a little bit tucked away in the woods, a beautiful campus, and we did pretty good, I think, for what we attempted to do. So I was able to actually, in my later years, when I was graduating, so in my senior year, I think it was around 2017, 2018, I actually dive a little bit more into data science. I did an undergraduate thesis in convolutional neural networks, where I was able to kind of view, say, functional MRIs, different architectures, and how we can start really bridging that gap between more so holistic practices of being able to sort of view neurodegenerative diseases with fMRIs, convolutional neural networks, and kind of tying healthcare and big data or artificial intelligence together. Though that's not exactly what I kind of transitioned into, it did a little bit kind of fuel the love and the passion for artificial intelligence, which is where my career continued to. So after I was done my education, not to ramble on too much here, I did a couple stints in the private and public industry. I worked for big banking. I worked for the CSC and CSIS. So for those watching in America or around the world, it was one of the Five Eyes, the kind of sister company of the NSA here in Canada. And a couple odd jobs between here and there, realistically, that were mostly in the data or software engineering space. Beyond that, I also have about 10 years in the public service as a reserve currently intelligence officer, for starting as an infantry soldier, spent about 8 years as a machine gunner. And where that kind of brings me right now, all leadership, artificial intelligence, and kind of software engineering in the background to founding my own company. So like you said, Gyroscopic Inc. Is the company I founded, and we run two product lines. That is Sifter, a circular economics engine that I can kind of dive into, quite niche. And then, like you said, Labnetik, which is our main forerunner, and it's a laboratory information management system for the construction, materials testing, and environmental engineering world.
Awesome stuff. So what I'm really interested in is the fact that you aren't like the archetypal data scientist, right? You're not like the guy hunched over the computer. You're in the military, but also you're an officer, so you're actually a leader. So one thing I'd really want to dive into is how do those skills complement each other? So how do you take the soft skill of leadership, let's say, and align that with such a technical background and a desire to work within the data?
Certainly. One thing I can say, especially pertaining to this company that I founded, and we saw when you talk about kind of strenuous circumstances and exposure to the elements, equivalent to kind of the military. We founded our company about 3.5 years ago, and that was prior to the pandemic. That was prior to sort of this sort of tech shuffle that we see with a lot of the layoffs and changing of structure, and this new AI boom that actually seems to see a lot of people also transition out of position. So leadership from the military kind of taught me, first off, on a personal level, you're always going to have these situations where you're going to be a little bit exposed to the elements, and the understanding of the extent of human capability when it is just the if it is a personal passion or an ethos of kind of persevering and looking to others to kind of influence and kind of bring the best out in these situations to get to that brighter day. From a little bit more of a holistic sense, when I think what has really kind of helped me in leadership in this role, I think, is the idea of servant leadership. I think in the military, I've had the opportunity, like I said, to serve for about 10 more years now. So I've seen, a whole slew of good and bad leadership. And on one side, I think some of the most amazing men and women that I've ever worked with, I've got to meet through the military. And one thing is common between all of them. And I think the reality of kind of servant leadership, and that's not just the title, but it is the understanding that to serve a system is the only way for that system to serve you. And that comes in obviously strived excellence, that comes in true passion towards what you're doing, and as well, excellence in what you do, as well as kind of bolstering it in the individuals around you. So I think when it came to my company, one thing that I was extremely lucky, we are a software company, so we are building a product. We're a product-facing company, and I was able to find a lot of passionate engineers. And I think just like soldiers, from my military background, when you're looking to invigorate and motivate someone, especially in the Canadian Armed Forces, the question is, well, why did you join? Why are you here? What are you getting from this? And the great thing about the military is most people, don't willingly go into such a strenuous career path without kind of that passion behind them. That's very similar for engineers. So, being able to actually look and understand each of my engineers, find something that is, invigorating to them or invoking of their passion, and basically say, well, you as an individual, if it's a soldier or an engineer, how can I put or how can I serve you and put things in your way to basically build you up into the person you want to be by giving you the experiences and sort of allowing you to surmount the mountains that you need to climb to make you more proud of the person you are, and give me that enthusiasm and that amazing effort, that I'm really thankful that I think all of my employees or all of my engineers have been able to do. So I think, like I said, servant leadership, understanding the passion of an individual, and how do I help bring out that passion and move things around at the company so I can basically give them the opportunity to be the best person that they can be, because for the most part, you hire someone for aptitude, interest, and passion, and everything else is just, teaching them. No one's a soldier when they come in. They have to become a soldier. And I think very much when it came to this company, we had engineers out of school, so they had the diploma and the paper, but if they were passionate, we can always teach them. And it turned out that, every single person that I think we hired was an amazing kind of addition to the team. And I don't know if we'd be able to do it without any of them. So I don't know if that kind of answers your question there, but I think that was probably one of the biggest learning lessons and the biggest takeaways that kind of transition between my time as an officer in the military, and then as well kind of leading this company with all these engineers and building the two products that are Sifter and Labnetik.
Yeah, that's all great stuff, because you talked there about how you have these, especially with the the engineers you hired, they're highly qualified, technically. But what a lot of leaders lack today, and with the podcast, a lot of the guys we speak to, they come from these big Fortune 50 companies with thousands of data leaders. So they're not very agile. And this is why I wanted to bring you on the show, because you kind of have this first person perspective of building these data teams. The best ways to do that, common pitfalls, which I'm sure we'll get into. But you kind of alluded to something that which really piqued my interest, which is the relationship building, the soft skills side. Like how you're asking these constant questions to yourself, which is, how do you empower these people how do you get the most out of them? How do you leverage those technical skills in the right way? Because to get the technical skills up, if someone wanted to do that tomorrow, it's very easy to go down that path and get those coding skills and building the platforms and doing all that great stuff. And it is a skill for sure, but where the rubber meets the road, and I think the 80-20 of building a data team is actually motivating people in the right way, seeing what their pain points are, their passions, their fears, and being able to build that relationship. So my question to you would be then, how have you gone about attracting talent, positioning both you as a leader, but also Gyro and Labnetik in the right way when you're hiring these guys?
Certainly. So I think a lot of it is kind of, I know you mentioned a couple of things here that I think are really good and kind of essential to a lot of our individual strategy to attracting talent and holding talent. And I think agility was one word that I think was said there. And I think, like you said, a lot of companies want to be agile, and they have this idea of, implementing someone or bring in someone to audit, or, an outside kind of entity or contractor to kind of make systems more agile. But I think one thing that has really made, getting talent to us, attracting it and kind of holding it, is the reality of the true agility of this kind of company and what we attempt to do. I'll dive into maybe later a little bit of what our LIMS is, and kind of us bringing a very, I would say, innovationally debt-heavy industry into industry 4.0, which has been a series of challenges, obviously, on change management, architectural design, data utilization, and a whole set of things that I think, at its very base level, is an amazing and beautiful set of challenges. And I think, to kind of let everyone know at a very front level, what we do is not always mapped out. We are truly agile in the sense of, there's not a lot of red tape. There's not a lot of kind of playbook for doing what we're doing, because a lot of other people haven't exactly done what we're trying to do in this industry. And for other people that have kind of been you could say, the icebreakers and trying to move into an industry that does not have full end-to-end data utilization, there's a huge amount of individual pieces that, sure, you can go by a playbook, you can do steps 1 through 3, but eventually when you go from 1 to 10, there's going to be individual pieces where you have to realize that just doesn't work here, and you have to change something up. I think it's a very much an exploratory kind of conquest, where the individuals that I hire and the individuals that we bring into the team, they know that what they're kind of venturing into is something that is a little bit new, and that if they do kind of join us on this kind of journey forward to sort of change this industry, that they can have an amazing impact here. And because we kind of are also very humble at the kind of top level of our job, we understand that we like to hire people that are smarter than us. We have very specific purviews, but we obviously cannot do everything. So with that being said, I might hire someone that is a very good, say, mechanical engineer, and we put them through the ringer and basically determine that they have all the tools that they need to basically understand maybe the paradigms or conceptual frameworks of what really makes a good data scientist or data worker. And then from that point, who knows what we're going to be in a week from now or 2 weeks from now or a month from now. But what we can promise to that individual is an ability to really allow them to run, figuratively, to the kind of speed that they really can, and really find out what those limits are and allow them to kind of build that CV, build their own trust in themselves, and also kind of feel that curiosity that they have about, what would it take? I started as, say, a mechanical engineer that was just maybe a junior developer. And then before I knew it, I was doing, analytics, data science. I was working with clients and liaising with these people at, CEOs from huge multi-million-dollar companies to basically, do design and analysis of how, we can utilize their data, or how we can do forecasting, anomaly detection, so on and so forth. So I think the biggest thing is, we very forwardly, we're not a big company, we're not Google, we're not Amazon, but what we can promise individuals is an ability to really, make a difference. And every piece of code that they push is going to have an impact. If they really want the opportunity, we will kind of put them into the position and give them all the responsibilities to allow them to try to get that opportunity. So I think that we ask a lot of our employees, and our employees deliver a lot, because I think they see how much we give to them, and it really is a kind of, symbiotic back and forth relationship.
Gotcha. So again, tons of stuff to go on here. So firstly, you mentioned that because you guys are a startup, you've been around for 3-4 years now, that no one has done this kind of stuff before. So there isn't really a clear roadmap there. But how intentional and rigorous are you with balancing that with the need to, for example, set clear priorities, or build a plan, or try and follow the tactical roadmaps as a leader? So do you have these systems in place to help you and the team with execution?
We do, yeah. So I think it definitely has a little bit of a blend. So I think as someone that is very pragmatic, and I think software engineers, data scientists, and kind of a little bit more of the usually technical heavy people are very pragmatic in that sense, where we everyone kind of has their education. I'm finishing up my master's now, and there's nothing more exciting than finding an awesome Medium article that tells exactly in 10 steps how to technically implement something. And I would say probably more than 50% of our work is exactly, when it comes to product development, we have, your full SDLC, so your software development lifecycle, and how we iterate through those things, or even just, say, understanding of kind of, eliciting the data needs of someone, then putting that into an interpretation and visualization, or even, a forecast, or so on and so forth. I think the other part that kind of, is a little bit more amorphous is the reality that, once again, the industry that we're kind of working with is the materials testing industry. It's the construction industry, it is the environmental engineering industry. And what we've really seen in a lot of industries in this data boom recently is, I want to call it an oversaturation, but very much a saturation in certain industries. And obviously, things like fintech, things like consumer goods, so on and so forth. It's very easy to bring data to an individual and kind of sell that data to them in regards to kind of the benefit. However, there's a huge amount of industries that, we're going to see not just now, but in the next 5 to 10 years, that have kind of been forgotten because they're not exactly the most profitable in a sense, and there's going to be other people like me. And even when we first started the company, we were consulting to get to a product focused company. And we worked with a whole series of companies, automotive to a bunch of other ones that I kind of won't dive into now, but they were also, I'd say, a little bit forgotten in the sense of, it wasn't a sexy industry, air quotation. So what we don't really know, and what we kind of have to make up a lot, is the change management, how to interact with individuals where they might not exactly see the value, and obviously what's going to be produced 3 steps down the line, because we're starting a data acquisition, game forecasting, so on and so forth. Those are all awesome pie in the sky things that we're going to deliver to them. But how do we get an individual from they're not capturing their data at all, and many other people in the industry aren't, onto the platform, and then finding that business process automation, the efficiency gains, just even in that low level stuff, say transcribing errors, entrance, data security, so on and so forth, to basically get them to that point where they're now a node in this network of, the big data world kind of 10 years from now. So we have our paradigms, we have our kind of, step-by-step guides, and then the kind of piece in the middle is, okay, well, how do we talk to these individuals? What do they care about? What are the personas? How do we bring them value? How do we communicate the value? And how do we get them to buy into our goals? What champions do we need to get them to that point some years from now, where that's another industry that now we have kind of a full data capture on, and we can, improve it to a point, who knows, 10, 20 years from now, where the efficiencies might seem like what we were doing today was, orchestrated by cavemen, if that makes sense.
No, that all makes perfect sense. And you mentioned as well the in the next 5 to 10 years, there's going to be these lost skills. So bear in mind the pace of technology change. What do you think that some of the categories of these lost skills will be?
Certainly. Well, I think it's difficult, because I think, especially when it comes to venture funding, and a lot of these amazing startups that peers of mine and other people in this space are making, the act of upskilling is always an amazing feat that I think society and kind of communities are always good at doing. So I wouldn't say that I never want to kind of move through this topic and discredit the individuals that are really involved with ensuring that the next generation is always capable to, tackle the problems of the future. So, and one thing, maybe just a small tangent, but, schools teaching people, a little bit more about data literacy, huge organizations, institutions, and startups basically saying, okay, well, if you have this skill or that skill, maybe we can transition you to this over here, and it would just take this many courses and so on. And then even some academic institutions, if they're increasing their breadth, or you're seeing other kind of companies like boot camps and so on kind of popping up and gaining a lot more legitimacy for this upskill issue. But so them on their own, I have a lot of confidence and a lot of faith in what they're doing. But I think aside from that, I do think from a macro level, where I'm kind of standing with my company, I think, not to sound too kind of doom and gloom, but the industries that aren't willing to basically move forward at the speed of what is needed, for, say, business change, obviously financial change with kind of everything increasing in cost right now, efficiencies and bottom lines are really huge. And if people aren't willing to kind of, move with the waves of the people that are hoping to exploit them, like our company and other people, around, they're going to be beholden, unfortunately, to, missing the margins, not being able to kind of keep up. And then those individuals, that didn't have that skill set from, say, using a new product like Labnetik, they're not able to kind of understand, what data stewardship is, how to move forward, how to even set up a forecast, on their end, and how to utilize all these tools. You're going to run into just not having the proper tool sets, or even, once again, the literacy to interact with things at even a lower level, like an administrator, from pen and paper. Obviously, maybe the last generation, having the upskilling of things like word processors, so on and so forth, and if that's, the ability to use things like Chat GPT, that might be a little bit more pie in the sky once again. But data literacy has to be interwoven at every single level, I think, of almost every single business. And I think the people that won't do that, I'm not going to say any industries specifically, but it's really the friction from an individual not wanting to kind of, I think, move forward with what the wave is at the moment. So I think everything is making a change. Administration is going digital, tracking is going digital, everything. That I think it's really the connection from the physical to the digital to help basically that bottom line more than completely getting rid of any one individual actor or trade job specifically.
Yeah, and this kind of ties in nicely with the trust piece, because you did touch on it earlier. So I'd kind of want to get both perspectives. So the first one being, so internally, so when you work with the engineers, you're trying to find out the pain points and what soft skills you can leverage and how you can upskill them in the change management piece. So how do you, because trust is obviously super important, right? So what do you think are some of the best ways to build and facilitate trust for the new employees, let's say, and the new data leaders on the team?
Certainly. So I could say I have my own kind of personal methods, and I've also had the opportunity to work with many other individuals that I think have amazing methods. And the way that I do it, I won't say it's a one size fits all sort of thing, but I think excuse me, the way I start, and one of the most important things I think for people that know me and kind of my leadership style is, first off, the dissolution of ego. So I think as a leader and as a CTO and as a C-level member, I'm also very young, and I think a lot of people can kind of look at that and say, like, well, you might have a little bit more to prove. You might have a little bit more that people might expect of you or more doubt you in. And I think dissolving the ego and kind of coming from the point where I am an individual, and really if it's an army kind of quote, one individual does nothing. It has to be a group of people that can actually kind of hold that hill or kind of push on any individual point. So when an individual kind of joins the team, I think that one-on-one connection, since the company is small enough, is really important. Reaching out to that individual and just having kind of a conversation, letting them know who I am, who they are, and kind of how I like to lead the group. And I think they understand pretty quickly. Like many other people say, we do have a linear organization. I still lead the stand-ups every day, and I'm still there in the individual retrospectives, the kind of sprint planning to basically have that one-on-one communication, and also knowing when's okay to kind of step away and allow the facilitation of kind of natural culture to happen on its own, and basically finding those individual champions within the own team, to kind of gain the trust from them and say, well, people look up to you, you're an amazing communicator. How can I maybe give you some of my or give you something that maybe I would individually lead, but might be a little bit better facilitated if there was some space between management and obviously yourself. And how can I empower you, give you resources, give you extra time, maybe take some things off your plate to allow you the opportunity, someone adjacent to me, to take this off my plate, so people can know that, first off, I trust you, you should trust them, and basically have psychological safety all around. If something's messed up, come tell me. Like, I gave you that opportunity, I understood, that's completely fine, so on and so forth. And also coming clean with some of those things. When I'm struggling, they see it. There's no kind of stepping back. Like, I'm working the same hours, if not longer hours. I get the hiccups. Everyone makes mistakes, and they're all out in public. Especially at a company of this size where there's so much work to do that everyone's wearing three hats. So I really do think, like I said, disillusion of ego. Learning about the individual, taking that time and finding out what they need, and then obviously giving them that opportunity, checking in, and when they do mess up, because it's going to happen, we all do. Providing that psychological safety and saying, it's okay. This is for the focus flow, individuality, decouple it, and basically how can I ensure that you have everything you need to kind of run, but also be a part of that kind of decentralized team too.
Super interesting as well, because what you're talking about there is the end state of a good leader, and it sounds great. But what I would want to get into is, from your specific perspective, because a lot of the guys watching the show, that they won't be C-level, they won't be directors, heads, VPs at the world's biggest companies, but they'll be like engineers, architects, scientists who love working in the weeds, and they love getting their hands dirty, so to speak. But you've kind of gone through the journey of doing that at some of the bigger companies and organizations, and then now being in this more leadership focused role. So what advice would you have for, say, letting go of some of those more in the weeds responsibilities and moving to a more senior position?
So I think that's a super difficult thing, and obviously I can only speak for the engineers, but I know when I was an engineer, it was very difficult for me to move from an IC, an individual contributor role, to a little bit more of a management role. And it's something that I conceptualized as something called delay compile time. So usually, as an engineer, when you want to compile something, you'll write some code, and you can iterate on that code very fast. You can debug it, you can check it and run it as many times as you want to find that bug. The issue, obviously, when it comes to management, is this idea of kind of delayed compile time, which is a lot of the efforts that you put in to kind of sow these seeds and sort of water your crop are not going to actually be able to, have a quick iterative cycle where you can actually run that code. You're going to have to wait a little bit longer, and you're going to have to actually create new tools, new debugging methods, or new, methodologies and frameworks for how you actually kind of evaluate, the success of something individual. So in the weeds, from a technical sense, kind of keeping your fingers in everything, and kind of saying, well, I could be a part of this, I could be a part of that, and really that's almost just an ignorance to all the other things that really need your focus. So I think it's your responsibility, if I hire some amazing engineers, to say, okay, well, if this is what you came here for, and if I'm just not giving you the opportunity to take this off my plate because it's something that I believe you might not be capable for, then there's an issue. I either have to give you the training or the responsibility to prove that you can do that, and I have to step back and ensure that the entire team is good, because I have to be at another level where I have to, on a macro level understand, how is the overall cohesion of the team, the overall efficiency, the overall pride for the product, so on and so forth. So I would say it's very difficult, moving from an IC to a manager role. You have to trust your people. You have to also kind of give up this idea of you being one individual thing that's very good and change that for maybe being something that's a little bit different, and also create these new frameworks of my job no
Mm.
longer is this in the weeds thing. It's taking care of the team, and how can I look into how the efficiency of this is. Do I have to talk to people? Do I have to set up new checks? Do I have to do new weird metrics? And that's a little bit more on the soft skill side. There's a lot of tools, right? I'm not talking about anything new. HR and much more customer focused people have created these systems and these tools and whatnot, and I think those are amazing ones to kind of sort of weave in and learn about. And maybe the one last thing that I always kind of love to plug is a famous author named Gene Kim wrote a series of books that are very awesome. They're basically these stories that kind of article, a story that is more technical focused, but it's very deep technical knowledge. So I won't get too much into them now, but in one of her famous books, I think it's the Unicorn Project, there's 5 ideals. And I think anyone that wants to become a manager from the kind of IC role, these 5 are really great for memorizing and just kind of weaving into your team. And they should be things that are kind of your focus. These are the things
Mm.
that are really important to you. The first one, or the first ideal, is just locality and simplicity. So the reality that your job should really be to understand that your team should be coupled, but it shouldn't be so coupled to the point that individuals rely on one another so much so that they can't do their job. Beyond that, focus, flow, and joy. Everyone wants to come into their job, and do what they want to do, knowing exactly wants to do, or more so if I'm an engineer, I want to be an engineer here. If I'm doing HR work, maybe that can bring a little bit of dissatisfaction to my role, and there's something wrong with the management there. The third one is, improvement of daily work, and you'll see this very often with retrospectives, so on and so forth. But how do we ensure that the individuals, like you said, retention of talent, understand that there's a concerted and deliberate effort to basically progress forward and constantly improve what we're trying to do? It might not be that great now, and maybe things are really difficult, but if you promise and if you honestly try to make things better, then people understand that. People will stay for that. The fourth one, almost there, is the psychological safety. Once again, giving the individuals an ability to fail is even more important than giving the individuals an ability to be successful. Success does not come without failure, and you have to ensure that when you are, if you have observability in what is happening and someone does fail, letting them know that that's okay. Letting them know that it's okay that they did that, and actually it's an important part of the process. And then basically, doing all the business kind of processes to ensure that, okay, well, someone else doesn't have to make that mistake. Smart people learn from their mistakes. Smarter people learn from other people's mistakes.
Mm.
And the last one, the fifth one, being is customer focus. And obviously, I'm a product-driven company in the private sector, so ensuring that everything we do is kind of based around this idea of a product, a customer-centric product. And I think a lot of other companies kind of are really good off going with the I'm a genius, CEO, and we're going to go off, my ideas because this is my baby. But I really do like the fifth ideal being customer focus, because it allows you, to kind of put away that, don't tie yourself too closely to it. Understand that we're making a product for a reason, and everything around kind of that customer focus is where you find
Mm.
your happiness. So those are the 5 ideals, maybe a little bit kind of, long strung there, but I think learning those as well and understanding that those are kind of your core things is
Mm.
what helped me personally. They'll waver from company to company, but have really helped me on this journey.
So, what role did those skills, both like the 5 skills you mentioned there, but also like the softer skills, so things like communications, influence, persuasion, what role
Mhm.
did these play in your success as a professional during your career, whether it's with Gyro or the other companies as well? For example, like you mentioned earlier that if you're working in the construction industry and you have an administrator who's on pen and paper, how do you? Maybe I'll ask you that later, but I was just thinking about how you would position that, position your product to take that off. But let's focus for now on how they played into your success as a professional during
Certainly.
your career.
Sure. So one thing I'll say is, not to make any too overarching kind of statements on the general progression of technology, but I think a lot of people kind of understand that technology is rapidly changing. And though I do believe that they will have software engineers for a very long time, I'm not one of those people that think they'll completely get rid of us. But the act of software engineering, the actual trading craft itself, is going to change very much. Already, if you talk about the integration of, say, Chat GPT, or even GitHub Autopilot, a lot of these great tools that we've been seeing and kind of have already been integrated and getting better and better every single day in our tools and our kind of daily operations. anyone can kind of code now. And that's a little bit of a big statement. Obviously there's good coders and there's not so great coders. Experience and passion is usually the in between. But the reality and the difference, the delta between, what we're seeing more and more, between a good coder and a great coder is the ability to communicate, and the ability to kind of discuss what is going on in that black box. A lot of what we're doing right now is kind of, especially in my industry specifically, is that change management. It's that communication. If it's from big banking that I was in, or the Secret Service, or kind of my startup right now, I always had critical points in my career where I had to, my code couldn't talk for myself, and your code to talk for yourself if that's your job. If you just want to sit at a desk and if you just want to, get information from somebody else, put it into an individual, kind of piece of code or a project, and you just push your code, you don't have to worry about it anymore and you go home. But if you want to make a little bit more of a bigger impact, you want to understand the full picture and you want to be a part of changing something, and actually more so putting that creative pursuit and effort into your work, you have to understand the surrounding pieces, of the kind of puzzle. And that does take communication. You're going to have to first off understand in your own kind of regard, okay, well, how can I take what I don't deal with every single day, how can I internalize that, or how can I understand the individual perspective? And I think one thing that you said was a construction worker, and I think a construction worker is a great one maybe for this, just the context of this kind of metaphor. But I have to first start with the understanding of who is this individual, what is the dynamic perspective that they have, what are the individual, some people call it a persona, in the UI and UX world, but what are the individual experiences or education, background, life, income, so on and so forth, that kind of paints the perspective or the unique lens of that individual. And how can I, where do I have to bring my vernacular, my understanding, my insights to basically ensure that I'm sort of shooting to a point where he can kind of understand. So a lot of it is more so just understanding dynamic perspective, understanding who you're speaking to, and kind of being that sort of chameleon. Might seem a little bit more deceiving, but being that person that can kind of get to another person's level and say, okay, well, I can kind of shave off all these pieces. And this is something that I specifically and deliberately created for you to understand, so we can talk, because I'm not here lecturing you. I'm not going to tell you about these things you don't need. I want to talk to you because I need to understand you, because you're an important part of this puzzle. And how do I do that? That comes with listening, understanding, so on and so forth. So I think one of my biggest strengths from that was kind of, like I said, the persuasion to let them know, like I'm friendly, I'm here for you, so on and so forth. The listening, the communication, it's really a whole part of a package. And without that, there's absolutely no way I would have got to all the opportunities that, I have, and I rely on it every day. And I hope that carries me in the future. Maybe it will burn me, but up until now, it's been working all right.
There you go. And I think that the actual ability to pitch data, it's almost like, I know this isn't what you guys do, but what you're alluding to there is data as a service. Like, how can I use my product, or how can this change what you're doing for you? And if you, as you said, if you're a product focused company, or you have a product focused, and this works for the data analytics teams in big companies as well, right? Like when they picture themselves as product focused, what that actually means is that they're going to be delivering real value and results. Whereas if they're just doing data for data's sake, as you said, you can sit in the weeds, you can do that, and that's great, and you can work on your big passion project. But to be able to take that next level strategically, you need to be able to leverage that. And you touched on there at the end, which I want to delve into, is kind of like the qualities. So what do you think are the qualities of data leaders, whether they're in the CTO role like you are, or in your previous roles, who actually inspire this real change? And what adjectives would you use to describe those?
Certainly. I think once again, my personal kind of leadership style might paint my perspective on these individual things, but I do believe that compassionate, I think understanding, I think patient, I think is a huge thing, because once again, we're not going to be fully data integrated for many years to come. So I think patience is one of those key things. And as well, once again, that individual piece that I kind of said about the ability to sort of, and a willingness more so than an ability, and kind of an open willingness to sort of change that perspective to meet the needs of somebody else, regardless of where they might not be at your level. So I think some of the greatest data leaders that I've seen and had the opportunity of interacting with, in our space, I think many of them have high responsibilities, they have high salaries, and they have high statures in these companies. However, it is very often their job to kind of separate themselves from that and understand, well, the skill that you have that is highly sought after does not exactly make you an exclusive kind of siloed character where you just get to kind of do what you want to do your own thing because you are highly sought after. Half of your job really is, you're needing that patience, needing that understanding, allowing yourself to kind of be like, well, you know, in some conversations that you might have to be called into, I might have to describe, what a web app is, or, like what, or how to use this Excel file. And that's okay because it's a relationship, like anything
Mm,
else. If it's a client, if it's an individual, or maybe a persona of, say, your product, what you have to do is understand that they might be starting at step one and you might want to get to step 70 or 80, but you have to take them all the way there. And I think that understanding, the openness, the patience, once again, those soft skills of just being able to kind of just communicate with an individual, understand that individual where they're coming from. And to that other part, like you said, when it comes to product centric views, and kind of the alignment, understanding in my company, a lot of what we've been doing is the sort of reality of, our goals are aligned, in data. I think, especially in the industry I'm in, a lot of what commerce is the exchange of not just goods but also kind of work hours. So I'm trading you this many hours and you have to pay me this much, and we go through remediation, or I'm giving you this good for that good. What really gets us value is when everybody wins. Data products very often are the ability, to integrate a service into an existing kind of set of operations and bring efficiencies, bring ways to save them money and basically bring, just benefits to that company. And I think sometimes that's also difficult, for individuals to understand. And I think data leaders, having their team understand that internally. And then obviously, I know sometimes when it comes to marketing, so on and so forth, that might be someone else's job, but very much having the outward world kind of understand, that
mm.
I'm here to make everyone win, so like, I'm a part of your team, because if you're not getting efficiency gains, then I'm not doing my job. So this is us in tandem, I'm building that communication and opening conversation. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, you brought up the number one challenge of leadership, essentially, which is having
Mm-hmm.
humility and patience
Mm-hmm.
and compassion, but also being able to lead, be assertive when it's needed, be courageous. So how do you balance those two out?
I think it's difficult, and I think a lot of it does kind of come with you have to constantly audit yourself. I think every single day, not to a point obviously where it's kind of crippling. I think being a leader in any job is very difficult. There's a lot of eyes and opinions on you, and every single day you're going to do something that might not be to the utmost kind of high level of your standards, because we have constraints, if that's time, if that's finance, or if that's just something comes down from on top and you have to do something that you might not totally agree with for the betterment of the company. So I think first off, understanding what your role is, and then getting sort of your core value pillars. So your company
Mm,
has a core value pillar, sets of them, and then what do you have as an individual, and does your company first off align with those? If they align with them, that's good. If not, then maybe that's something for a different kind of podcast about quitting your job. But if you're there and there is some sort of alignment there, then I think the question is, okay, well, asking yourself maybe in the morning or at the end of the day, did I act within kind of those lines or those pillars, and is that right with the company? And if not, maybe kind of going from there and saying, well, how can I change that? Having mentors
mm,
around you that you trust in, maybe even having some individuals, say employees to yourself, that is still a professional relationship, to ask for feedback, or have, how some people do, double blind or kind of, any of these services to get anonymous feedback back. But I think realistically, first off, auditing yourself, understanding where you kind of lie. Maybe you gave up a little bit too much ground in that last position, and
mm,
people are, being affected by that. You gave too much to the client. Now your employees are suffering. Understanding what that is and saying, okay, well, it's my job. This is a pillar, employee happiness. So now I have to push back a little bit more. And I think, that comes with pulling back as well. So I would say there's no kind of definitive sort of, I would say, set of rules in regards to where to find how much push and how much pull you should give. But if you're honest to yourself, and if you kind of lay out your values, and if you have some people around you that care about you, and you can kind of ask them for their opinion, I think you can create a really good system for auditing yourself, and understanding, if you weren't the best that you could be today, you need to be a little bit
mm,
more stern. You need to be a little less stern. Do it tomorrow, do it the day after, work towards it, sort of thing. But every day is an attempt to be the better leader, that you want to be. It's never done. It's going to change till the day that, you leave your career. So understand that it's a painting. The painting's not
mm.
done, just enjoy the process. You're never going to be perfect. Just keep on trying, I would say, and learning where that balance is between too abrasive, not abrasive enough, too compromising, too accommodating, so on and so forth.
I like the framework you give, which is, okay, you put the personal audit in the middle, which is kind of like the soft skill stuff, which is the stuff that's going to be more fluid. It's going to be affected by mood and weather and diet and all the millions of other factors, relationships, that exist outside of that. But you can surround that with these supporting functions. Am I good at my job? Do I have a good product? Do I have a genuine need and desire and passion to do that stuff? You can control. So if you have the right support function in place, it almost protects the person. Then you can, as you said there, use the personal audit to not adjust the whole system, but just to tweak and fine tune until you find a pattern that works for you. So this is super cool. So currently, as the CTO, how would you characterize your role? Because you are, like, on paper, you're the chief technology officer, right? But what do you actually? How do you operate on a day to day? What would you use to describe that? Would you call yourself like an evangelist? Would you call yourself a therapist? How would you go about that?
Certainly. I think I would say, obviously, as our company's grown, from say 3 years ago, the role has changed drastically from where I started to where I am. And I think the title for the role might be a little difficult and, once again, a little bit more amorphous. But I think, it would be equally two parts: one part chief architect and the other part just firefighter. I think when it comes to architecture, and when you're leading a company, there always has to be a little bit of a 1,000-foot view, and also viewing, say, maybe 10, 20 steps in the future. So a lot of what I do in the day to day is first off managing a series of interdisciplinary teams, everything from product managers to designers to engineers to front end, back end, user experience, so on and so forth, and basically being a little bit of the conduit, or more so nexus, to understanding where we're trying to go. Obviously, very often the CEO will come down and say, okay, well, this is where we're going to be, in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, so on and so forth. And very often that gets passed to the CTO in regards to, from a product perspective, more so how we get there. And I think in a day to day, a lot of the engineers get caught up in the very technical minutia of the weeds of things. If it comes to individual problems, well, how do I increase this efficiency, or how do I deal with this bug or this piece of code, or so on and so forth. And very often that's what they're supposed to do. It's very important for them to do. But understanding you're kind of doing a little bit of a wrangling where you have to remind everyone, okay, well, there's a lot of tangents you can go on. We can constantly go in this direction or that direction, or build something up on this, say, individual microservice or facet of the company that might be hugely useful. But understanding, from obviously the CEO on the C level, and all the other individual pieces, investors and product and so on. Well, does that fit, where we're trying to go? Once again, our values, what we need in 3, 5, and 10 years. And, are we constantly kind of tweaking individual pieces to ensure that everyone is going in the right direction? Because I think it's very often that sometimes, when the CTO is absent, or an individual kind of overseeing body is not kind of that connection between the rest of the non-technical C level and the investors, you get these runaway kind of products and companies where they become very divergent from where you're supposed to be, in a not kind of pivot sense, but something that's unintentional. And I think kind of ensuring that, if that is through communication, if that is through meetings, if that is through higher level architecture, even from a technical perspective, or even just meeting clients and what their needs are, where we want to be, so on. And then the second part, being a firefighter, I think is a job of probably all management, and very much in this role. But anytime that something comes up that someone might not be fully equipped to deal with, or might not be able to deal with, it's your job to do it. So for any given day, I could be called in to solve bugs, or talk to a client, or do a product roadmap, sometimes do financial strategy and things that even fall to other C levels. But because ownership goes from top to bottom, if that is the product, the code you push to the individual or the whole company itself, if someone can't pick it up, you have to ensure that you are there to pick it up. And no matter what it is, you kind of have to get it done, or find someone that can. So you find yourself learning a bunch of things you never thought you would as a CTO. But I would say chief architect, kind of vision, sort of muse or guide, and then firefighter.
I like the way you mentioned that the guys working in the weeds. It's almost like 5s and 20s. It's like you check the engineers are checking their 5 meter and their 20 meter surroundings, and you're kind of doing the 20 meters and 100 meters. And sometimes the situation will dictate that you need to fall back and work on the 5s as well. That's kind of where the firefighting piece comes in there. So, tons of great insights here. Just got a few more questions for you. So, what made you really want to work in data, and specifically go down the engineering route? What do you like most about the job?
Certainly, I think when it comes to data specifically, I think it is, everyone throughout history in my field, technology, has been able to sort of capitalize on the changing of something. If it's transistors and vacuum tubes, the television and so on and so forth, you can kind of look through and create a little bit of a narrative on a linear progression of, technology and being able to work on, something that, changed or completely maybe made a divergent kind of stream and where we are today, if you talk about the steam engine and so on and so forth. And I think data really is kind of a next frontier and something that is drastically changing not just how we do business but how we're living. I don't think there's a single piece of society that is not going to be drastically infected by the data boom that we're experiencing, and obviously the integration of where I kind of really specialize, which was artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning. And I think it's a great honor, to be a part of something that I really believe is going to be drastically affecting the future. And what I hope, for my own kind of core values is, also doing it sustainably, morally, and ethically. So I think, when it comes to my kind of individual studies, as my undergraduate, my master's, as well as my kind of company, I think, there's a lot of individual places that, you can bring data to and really increase the efficiency, effectiveness, and also I think the happiness of the individual workers, really bring them forward and have them benefit from this data. So it's a universal tool, kind of like the soft skills that we were talking about, where I think knowledge of data, obviously there's the AI ML side, but all the way just from data literacy, is a tool set that I think is valuable in almost any field. And I saw the opportunity, I was excited by the opportunity, and I really just said I want to be a part of, the team that is building the future that utilizes that. And I want to do it right, and I want to have a say, and I want to ensure that's, once again, ethical and moral, and it's really exciting. So a lot of answers there, but I think that's kind of what drove me here, and it's what currently keeps me here.
What do you think are the greatest opportunities for ambitious data engineering teams and leaders today?
I think I do have a little bit of a bias, obviously, as an entrepreneur. I do think, and I say this to young engineers of all sorts, and honestly people, but more so from a career perspective. I think in life, and this might be a little bit more of a higher idea, but success can be anything. It could be finance to you. It could be, working for the big company, say Facebook, Google, so on and so forth, whoever it is. And that could be something that, is really important to you. And that kind of gives you the seal and more so that fulfillment that, you kind of get to kind of get you through the day and, make you happy and make you feel fulfilled in your job. I think one thing that's really, really important for someone that is a really good data scientist, engineer, so on and so forth, I think they have to really ask them the question, what is it that, you want to do? I think in the past, when software engineering was a little bit more new and data science, and it was a little bit more in its infancy, we're moving a little bit to a medium maturity where jobs are everywhere. Everyone needs a data scientist. Everyone needs a software engineer, and you can really do anything you want to do. And also you have a huge set of skills, understand that you are valuable. You can bring, value to an individual company. And instead of asking or, thinking, well, who's going to take me? I think, asking yourself, well, what can I affect? What can I change? What is something that I might have a really unique individual perspective on? And how grandiose would it be, or how beyond me would it be to maybe try to affect something positive there? So I think, and maybe this was just my own self, you don't exactly have, when I was in school, I think the engineering mindset or data scientist mindset, unlike maybe some of the more soft skills, social sciences and stuff, I didn't see a lot of data engineers going or in my degree more so wanting to work for, I don't know, NGOs, or nonprofits or charities or whatnot. But now those companies are looking for those people. You can start your own company, that has a positive benefit there. So this might be a little bit more of a fluffy kind of ad, but I would say if you're young or not young, if you're talented at any age, and you really want to make an impact. And I think fulfillment means a lot too. I think it's asking yourself, what do you want in life? And maybe paving your own way and really just being honest to kind of maybe taking that lead, taking that a little bit more odd or obscure job and work for someone that aligns with your own values.
Awesome. Well, Waun, it's been a genuine pleasure speaking with you in this more formal context. And it's been a great podcast. Thanks for coming on the show.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Paul. It was great, and hope to hear from you soon.